Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. Today we've got a battle in the Japanese Tier 10 heavy cruiser, the Zhao, being sailed for us by May Griffin. The Zhao was one of the oldest ships available in World of Warships, but unlike arguably certain other ships, despite the introduction of new and different lines and nations, the Zhao hasn't really been affected by power creep much, if at all. I really like this ship. The playstyle hasn't really changed much. The Zhao specialises in unloading devastating volleys of 12 8-inch shells at extreme range, bitch slapping the crap out of its target and then slipping away into undetection. It did that exceptionally well back when it was first introduced, and it does it exceptionally well now. And it's able to do this because it's got something that no other Japanese heavy cruiser has, all the way back to the Furataka at Tier 5. New guns. Yes, the third year type guns that have been a staple of the Japanese heavy cruisers, from the Furataka at Tier 5, through the Aoba at Tier 6, the Miyoko at Tier 7, if you upgrade to them, the Mogami at Tier 8, and the Ibuki at Tier 9, finally get ditched in favour of 12 brand spanking new, all singing, all dancing, 50 caliber Type 18 8-inch guns with improved high explosive and armour piercing shells over its predecessor, the Ibuki at Tier 9, and which feature the blistering muzzle velocity of 920 meters per second. Before the introduction of HMS Conqueror, the Zhao was known as the best fire starter in the game, and it's still pretty scarily efficient at it, with each of these 8-inch shells having a base 19% chance of setting a fire on target. And that's before you take into account things like the demolition expert skill, or signal flags like Victor Lima and Juliet Whiskey. Because it's a heavy cruiser, it really doesn't need the IFHE skill, and so it's not unusual to see Zhaos sailing around blasting off salvos of 12 8-inch high explosive shells, each of which have a more than 20% chance of setting a fire. May's only fired 2 salvos from these gun batteries, and he's already set 2 fires. Personally, I think he's been shortchanged. The other good thing about these high explosive shells, even if they don't set any fires, but they are going to set lots of fires, is the raw damage that they do. 3,400 damage per shot, potentially. And don't forget, this ship fires 12 of them every time you pull the trigger. In fact, don't take my word for it. Observe, as May demonstrates on the Osterjotland over there, appropriately enough, from the YOLO clan. And there's the first blood award and the first kill of the match. Also, note May's careful positioning here. He's taking cover behind this island in order to continue shooting while remaining undetected. The flat firing arcs and high muzzle velocity of these guns do have that one drawback, however. I mean, yes, they give good accuracy and short travel time to the target, but you can't really take advantage of islands in the same way that, for example, an American light cruiser or destroyer can. This island, however, is just about perfect for his purposes, although he is detected now, but it's not by any of the ships in front of him. They can't see him. He's just far enough away from the island, and it's just low enough that they can't see him while he's shooting, and he's able to shoot over it. He is detected, and it's probably, well, it has to be from over there. An enemy destroyer must have sneaked around. And where there's a destroyer, there are also probably going to be torpedoes, and since he is spotted by whoever it is who's lurking away up there to the north, all of those other enemy ships can also see him and shoot back at him over the island. The Moskva has also realised that there must be an enemy destroyer to the north and has popped his radar. It's a shame the Roma wasn't paying attention too, because it looks like he's going to eat all of those torpedoes fired by the Halland, who's been located over there to the east. Swedish torpedoes, of course, blisteringly fast, 86 knot speed on those torpedoes, and the Halland can put 10 of them into the water. Individually, they don't do a huge amount of damage, of course, which is why it took 9 of them to finish the Roma off. Moskva's radar, of course, has long range, but doesn't last very long. Oh, 4 penetrations on the Halland and a fire, which is continuing to burn. So that's nice. Is he going to survive this second salvo? Not quite sure how he got detected again. He didn't fire his guns, did he? Oh, another fire. Yeah, he's dead. Hugging the border ain't going to do you any good here, sunshine. You are brown bread. And, yep, there it is. Kill number 2. Actually, now that I come to think of it, ships that are on fire have their surface detection range increased by 2 kilometres, and the Halland's concealment isn't great to begin with, and that would have been just enough for him to be detected again, even without firing his guns. Unfortunately, of course, in the length of time that it's taken for May to secure his team's only 2 kills, the enemy team have sunk 4 of his teammates. Now, you'd think that the Tirpitz B up there would be about to die. You'd think that the Hindenburg would be able to finish him off. You'd think that, and you'd be wrong. In fact, the Hindenburg, oh dear lord, yep, the Tirpitz is recovering health. Over to the west, there's a North Carolina in all kinds of trouble. He's not going to survive those torpedo hits, and the North Carolina dies just about at the same time that the Tirpitz B actually kills the Hindenburg. So May is still the only person on his team to have scored any kills, and now the enemy team have finished off 6 of his teammates. The Tirpitz B down there, after recovering some health and finishing off the Hindenburg, manages to go undetected, but the Hindenburg did at least manage to set enough fires that finished off the Tirpitz, earning the Hindenburg a flesh wound award, but I'm not entirely sure that a Tier 10 cruiser for a Tier 8 battleship was a very good trade. Over to the west, there is a lone Östergötland, Sweden, letting me know how I'm doing with my pronunciation, putting some torpedoes in the water in an attempt to hold back what could be 6 enemy ships while being harassed and spotted by the enemy Shikaku. May takes the extremely brave decision upon himself to sail over here and help the destroyer out. I mean, look at the cluster of enemy ships that were last spotted over here. I'm not sure this is a good idea. But then again, if you are going to be conducting a fighting withdrawal, there are not many ships in the game that are better at it than the Zhao, and not just because of its extremely good stealth for a heavy cruiser and the range of its guns, but also because of these torpedoes. The Zhao is one of the few Tier 10 ships in the game that can actually be upgraded, and you should upgrade the torpedoes, because they do 23,000 damage and can be stealth launched. The firing arcs, as you just saw, aren't great. They can really only be fired around the rear quarter of the ship, but it gets 10 of these in 2 launchers per side. And the fact that they can only really be fired to the rear means that if you're chasing after a Zhao, you don't just have to worry about trying to land shots on it in the rare moments when it's actually visible just after shooting, as he's sailing away from you at 34.5 knots, more if they're running a speed flag, and they're certainly always going to be running a speed flag, but you also have to worry about anything up to 20 of these torpedoes ploughing their way through the water at a speed of 67 knots, each of which can do over 23,000 damage. And let's not forget, of course, the relative speed of the torpedoes, because you're probably going to be chasing after the Zhao at a speed of 30 knots or more. The relative speed of the torpedoes is probably actually going to be something more like 100 knots. Yeah, that's right, Swedish destroyers with your 86 knot speed torpedoes. Who's laughing now? Well, at this precise moment, not really May Griffin. That is a lot of enemy ships. And those are citadels. Haven't really talked about the armor-piercing shells on the Zhao yet, have we? Believe it or not, the shells are actually heavier, not by much, only 3 kilos, but heavier than the 8-inch shells fired by the Des Moines. Yep, chew on that one for a minute. Heavier and with better muzzle velocity, although without the improved penetration angles that the American armor-piercing gets. But when a ship's giving you broadside like that kind of range, heavier and with higher muzzle velocity will do. So, one Prinz Eugen neutralised. Now, I don't want to say that coming over here and losing half of his health in order to help out the friendly Östergötland was a colossal waste of time, because the Östergötland didn't take the hint and run and hide, and instead got himself sunk by the Cleveland over there. But, well, May did manage to take out a Prinz Eugen and did some damage on a couple of other enemy ships, so not a total waste of time. In the meantime, some of his teammates have actually managed to sink a few ships, including the Shikaku, who scored a detonation on the enemy Zhao. Yeah. Seriously? Scroll back, check the battle messages, that really happened. Meanwhile, the Moskva, who spotted the Halland earlier, has once again used his radar at precisely the right moment and revealed the positions of not one but two destroyers that are in hot pursuit of May Griffin here. May pops a couple of shots off, is rewarded with another fire and multiple hits, then switches to the armour piercing, tucked in behind the island here so neither of those two destroyers can torpedo him, and unloads a couple of 8-inch care packages in the general direction of the enemy Minotaur, earning himself a double citadel for his efforts. The other point of poking in here was to try to get the killing blow on a broadside in Cleveland, but the Cleveland was charging into a bow-tanking Moskva, so that worked out about as well as you'd expect. Suddenly, it's 5 against 5. Still the question of those two enemy destroyers, however, and manoeuvring to turn around inside this narrow gap has rendered him awfully vulnerable to torpedo attack from the enemy carrier, but the enemy carrier doesn't really appear to... No, I'm not sure what that was, but it wasn't effective. With anything up to 2 enemy destroyers closing in, May decides that now would be a really good time to pop his hydro. He's not just going to rely on his hydro, however, because those are Swedish destroyers and their torpedoes are incredibly quick, although they've got a little bit of catching up to do. Instead, he's going to pull a turn around this island. Narrowly missed torpedoing the Erland over there, and is completely safe, at least from the first spread of Erland torpedoes. The tragically funny thing here, though, is that even if that Erland had hit with all 3 of those torpedoes, and they had been the upgraded torpedoes, there still wouldn't have been enough to finish off a Zhao on 32,000 health. I do kind of feel for that guy in the Erland, though. I mean, I had a similar situation myself the other day. I was in the Swedish Tier 7, the Scania, came around the corner, found a Dallas at point-blank range, unloaded all 6 torpedoes into him, 5 of them hit, and then the Dallas sank me. Yep. 5 torpedoes from a Tier 7 Swedish destroyer aren't enough to kill a Tier 6 American light cruiser. Well, we'll discuss the pros and cons of the IKEA destroyers at some point in greater detail in the future. For now, well, luckily, well, even if he hadn't had his hydro running and spotted the Shimakaze torpedoes, the Akazuki would have seen them and spotted them for him anyway. Still a Shimakaze out there, although there are now only 3 enemy ships, and one of them is the carrier, and one of them is spotted. Akazuki up there managed to finish off the Shimakaze. Again, I don't know if you noticed, it was actually a detonation. So many people sailing around in random battles without detonation flags. Although, well, they've earned a few for free now. Look at the amount of health that Moskva is on. So who's the enemy carrier going to send his dive bombers after? Yep. Not the Moskva, who's a guaranteed kill. Nope, he's going to try to bomb an Akazuki who's invisible inside a smokescreen. There have been some seriously suspect target selection choices made during the course of this game. May has shots on the North Carolina, who is still spotted thanks to the friendly Graf Zeppelin, despite the fact that the Akazuki has been forced to shelter inside a smokescreen. And remember, these 8-inch high explosive shells can each do up to 3,400 damage each, and the Zhao fires 12 of them. Zhao also, by the way, and this is not an insignificant detail, but it's the kind of detail that can only really be exploited by players who know the ins and outs of their ships, which is one of the reasons why I mention it here. You know, I'm not just here to entertain, hopefully I can also educate. The Zhao has 30mm of belt armour. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not if you're given flat broadside, or exposing enough of the Zhao's ankles and skirts in order to get all 12 of these guns firing. A battleship's armour-piercing shells will slap right through that. Oh, is this going to be kill number 5? Please tell me it's going to be kill number 5. That's kill number 5. There's the Kraken Unleashed. But 30mm of belt plating is more than the standard 27mm of belt plating that most Tier 8, 9 and 10 heavy cruisers have, which means properly angled, the Zhao is actually able to bounce a surprisingly large amount of battleship caliber armour-piercing shells. Not that that's really going to be much of a consideration for May Griffin for the rest of this match, since the only thing left alive on the enemy team, aside from an extremely desperate-looking half-squadron of Shikaku dive bombers who have only now decided that it might be a good idea to try to sink the Moskva, Too little too late, of course. He's just used his radar, spotted the Minotaur that May comprehensively bitch-slapped earlier with a double citadel, forcing the Minotaur to open fire, and the Minotaur's the one who sank the Moskva. But not before the Moskva had managed to shoot down all of the Shikaku's aircraft. Sometimes it really sucks to be a carrier. I know to a casual observer it may sound like I don't have an awful lot of sympathy for aircraft carriers in World of Warships, but I can always find sympathy for the aircraft carriers in this game. It's right there in the dictionary, between shit and syphilis. Oh, it looks like the Minotaur has decided he's going to go down fighting. He's knocked out one of May's guns. He's used the repair key, obviously, because the Minotaur, even though it's going to die, if he switches fire, he can do a shocking amount of damage in a very short period of time. He's got a choice to make here, though. Run into the island or expose broadside. Although he might not even survive long enough. Yeah, he's really starting to do some pretty seriously nasty chunk damage to the Zhao here, and he's slowed, so the armor piercing is having a hard time finding a good angle. Oh, that was a nasty chunk, but you can see the damage that the Minotaur is actually doing here. Luckily, of course, May's got a heal ready, and the Minotaur is now a sitting duck. 6 kills for May Griffin. Yes, I know, it's a Family Guy reference. In the Zhao, but only 130,000 damage done. True, some of those kills were on targets on very low health, but also 2 of the kills were destroyers, and when you make it your business to clap the bum cheeks of lollyboats, those lollyboats don't have an awful lot of health to be clapped. But a good team effort all round. Well, eventually. Certainly not at the beginning of the battle. Salvaging victory from the very jaws of defeat. May Griffin, thank you. Well done. Everybody else, I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.